Alcohol. I don't think we talked about alcohol, but alcohol is a very hot topic right now. I'll tell you what we do here at the restaurant, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at home. But I do believe, I know, I'm confident that alcohol has been in our diet well before even meat was in our diet. And we can dive deep into this, but there is something called the drunken monkey hypothesis, which suggests that all mammals will seek out alcohol whenever possible. And it's true. It's hardwired into us. And there's some very important reasons why. But to suggest that alcohol is a new thing in our diets is false. Alcohol is, at the level it's at in our diets, is very new. Fully distilled alcohol is new. Mixed cocktail drinks is new. But alcohol, especially in a wild fermented form, has been in our diets for millions of years. So that's not to suggest whether it's healthy or not, but if you're looking for an ancestrally appropriate approach to food and you're excluding alcohol because you believe our ancestors never had it, I would argue with you about that. That's not to suggest it's healthy or not. That's where we are with that. So what we've done here at the restaurant and what we do at home as well is we have taken a very similar approach to alcohol as we have with food. So what we're saying is, we're meeting people where they are. And like, for example, we have a sourdough bakery here. I don't eat hardly any bread whatsoever. Whenever I do, it's sourdough, but we have it because for some people, they want to come in here and eat full carnivore. Some people come in here and they're full carnivore, but their husband isn't and their kids definitely aren't. So, what we're doing is we're making familiar food as nourishing as it can possibly be by implementing all these traditional approaches. So we have things like sourdough and the like for them. Same sort of thing with alcohol. What we've done is we've set up a criteria of this is what we will do and never do with alcohol. And for those of you who continue to include alcohol in your diets, I think there's some really key takeaways here. Number one, the category of wine is a huge category. Everything from, $4 a bottle Boone's Farm from the local convenience store all the way to $300 bottles of wine. So just like with bread and any other category of food, there's a huge spectrum of things that we call wine. Some of them, I would argue, could be a part of a healthy diet when consumed in the right way, and some of them should never cross our lips. You can have 96 additives in a bottle of wine in this country that do not have to be on the label. 96 additives in a bottle of wine. And that could be a $300 bottle of wine. The price doesn't necessarily make a difference for that. The growing, like everything else, the growing practices of the grapes, how they're processed, all of those things impact whether or not it's something that I would consider worthy of putting in my lips. So we restrict ourselves to regeneratively grown and harvested grapes that have been spontaneously wild fermented and have been done in a traditional way with no additives. So we actually import all of our wine from the Republic of Georgia, which has the oldest traditional grape tradition in the world. They're actually wild fermented in these clay things called querbies in the ground. It's brilliant. So all of our wine meets those standards. All of our beer is sour beer. It's local sour beer. Every single loaf of bread from 8,600 years ago into the mid-1800s was a sourdough loaf of bread, which meant it had a wild yeast and bacterial fermentation happening side by side. And every single bottle, can, jar, leather pouch of beer ever made for thousands of years also was a sour beer that had both of those fermentations. So we only serve sour beers. And as far as hard alcohol is concerned, and this is, I think, a very important one, there are a lot of biohackers and other people in the health field that suggest that distilled alcohol is the cleanest way to consume alcohol. And they make a point. Now, distilled alcohol isn't ancestrally appropriate because there was no distillation that long ago, but there is a point when you compare that distilled alcohol to most of the commercially available wines and beers and things today, which have all kinds of nonsense in them. Again, remember that the wine and the beer that I'm talking about are different wines and beers, but distilled alcohol is a very, very clean thing. The problem comes in when you start mixing drinks and making cocktails, because all of a sudden you're flooding it with artificial colors and flavors and tons of nasty sugars and all these other things that we shouldn't consume in our diets whatsoever. And then as soon as you start drinking and you lose your ability to think properly, you start consuming more of them, and then it becomes a real issue. So what we decided here, and the same thing I would suggest for somebody at home, is if you're going to consume hard alcohol, distilled versions of these things are very clean. If you're going to have a cocktail, then get the highest quality distilled alcohol possible and make anything you're going to put into it. So everything that we have here, we're making all of our vermouths, we're making our Campari, we're making all of our Amaros, we're making our tonics. All of that is made very traditionally. We're making it in-house using the same standards that we have. So you could even come here, and again, I'm not suggesting you have a mixed drink, but if you're going to have a mixed drink, what you have here is a completely different food than the mixed drink you're going to have at TGI Fridays, and it'll meet certain standards.
All right, let's come back to the drunken monkey hypothesis. This is something that's new to me.
Okay.
You mentioned the fact that animals out in the wild will seek out alcohol, and you mentioned some important reasons for that. So what are those? Okay.
I don't know if we got to, I forget if we talked the last time we talked, but fruit, the role of a fruit is to attract an animal when the seeds are mature, to eat the fruit, ingest the seeds. The seeds are chemically and physically designed to withstand the digestive tract of the animal, and sometimes require it through a process called scarification in order to even germinate at some point. And then they deposit the seeds in a pile of manure, the perfect situation somewhere over here, and then the plant continues to propagate and it has babies. So this only works when the seeds are mature. And in almost all fruits, there's a level of toxin, in some cases very high toxins, prior to the seeds becoming mature. And they're dangerous and they're problematic. And then when they don't want the seeds to get eaten before they're mature, because if the seeds are eaten before they're mature, then there's no chance of them growing into an adult plant. This is a coevolutionary process over millions and millions and millions of years, and it works really, really well. So unripe fruits are dangerous. Ripe fruits are less dangerous or not dangerous whatsoever. The toxin mechanism is turned off in almost all cases. It smells sweet, it tastes sweet, it attracts animals, and then the animal eats it and whatever. The suggestion of the drunken monkey hypothesis, and this is a hypothesis that was put forth by an anthropologist at University of California, Berkeley. He wrote a great book called The Drunken Monkey Hypothesis, or it's just called The Drunken Monkey, I think. It's a fantastic read. And his suggestion is the only way, there's an evolutionary mechanism that allows mammals to know when that fruit is at its safest. Its most safe, low toxin, nutrient available form. And that's when it's actually started through the fermentation process. And it will not ferment until that toxin is turned off and all the sugars are in a state to start fermenting. And it will spontaneously ferment. The fruits will fall off the tree, they'll hit the ground, the sugars will be exposed, it'll start fermenting. It has a particular aroma and it'll attract an animal, and an animal will go there because it knows that it's at its safest form. This is at least the suggestion for the hypothesis. And it's true. I mean, this happens on a regular basis in the wild. And you can Google or hit YouTube on drunken monkey hypothesis, and you'll see all these drunk animals. The example I usually give is a giraffe looks silly anyhow. A sober giraffe is silly. A drunk giraffe is one of the funniest things you've ever seen in your life. So this does happen. And this started, I think part of his thinking was, one of the questions people typically have is, okay, I get these kind of coevolutionary mechanisms, but why the heck are people attracted to sugar? Like, why are they attracted to sugar? And the suggestion for that is there's nothing in nature that's sweet that's toxic. So if it's sweet, it's safe, and they equal out. And we have this, but something sweet in nature is scarce compared to the sweets that we have today. So we never had that sort of need to shut this mechanism down that attracts us to sugar. And the same sort of idea here with the drunken monkey hypothesis, the idea that, okay, if it's fermenting, then it's safe for us to eat, at least from whatever that other toxin was, right? But at the same time, we're not talking about distilled alcohol. We're not talking about the ability to go to the corner liquor store and buy 3 cases of beer and all of a sudden send yourself to the hospital because you have alcohol poisoning. It's impossible to do, I think, using just natural wild fruit fermenting on the ground. Could you get a little bit of a buzz? Probably. Are you going to end up in the hospital? Probably not. So we now have these, we're living in caveman bodies in a modern world with different resources available to us in different quantities. Whether it's we can eat bags of shelled almonds and give ourselves oxalate toxicity, or whether we can drink, a gallon of vodka and wind up dead. We have a different cultural system that we're working in, but we still have these senses that are very, very, very ancient.
One beverage that a lot of people in the health world are drinking, and I know your morning actually involved kombucha. How do you feel about it? Obviously, you're picking some up or involved in it somehow this morning. Talk about that, and then how you feel about that in the health world.
I love kombucha for a few reasons. One is because, I just love the taste of it when it's done well. I love the fact that it's full of all sorts of live things. There's not enough live things, obviously, in our diets. The only concerns that I have for kombucha, and again, there is another resource that does have alcohol. Now, it's a very, very minuscule amount, but same thing. We think it's strange, a SCOBY, a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, but the bacteria and yeast fermentations have always happened side by side naturally. And the fact that we have separated them from one another, and the fact we can buy a package of yeast at the grocery store and make bread and leaven the bread without the bacterial fermentation is a brand new thing in the history of the world. So it's very common. So that sort of fermentation that involves both of them is a very common thing. I love the taste of it. I love the fact that it's filled with probiotics. The two concerns that I have with kombucha are, if you have a sensitivity to oxalates, I would find out what teas that they're being made from. So if the basis of the tea is black tea, then it's probably not the kombucha that you want to ingest in high amounts if you have an issue with oxalates. The cool thing is, as more people are experimenting with kombucha, they're realizing they don't need these high oxalate teas in order to form the basis of the kombucha. And that people are doing them now with all sorts of herbal teas, and some people are doing them with Yaupon holly. Do you know Yaupon holly?
No.
Okay, Yaupon holly is a really cool plant. It is the only plant native to Eastern North America that has caffeine. And it was used traditionally for a very long period of time. We know the Cherokee Indians drank it. It was part of a ritual that they would create. So it was also called the black drink. And what they would do is they would fast for days and days and days and days and days, and then they would brew an incredibly strong batch of this Yaupon holly tree and of tea made from it. And then they would drink massive quantities of it. And because of the fact they were coming out of the fast, had fasted for so long, and this huge influx of caffeine, I mean, they would hallucinate and do all these things. It was part of a ritual. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but it was very important to them. The cool thing about this tea is that it tastes delicious. It does have caffeine for those of us who want caffeine, and it has no oxalates in it. It's an amazing combination for those of us who want to drink tea, want to get caffeine, and don't want all those oxalates. And the other kind of cool side of it is it has the genus and species of the actual plant is Ilex vomitorius. And the reason is because if you ingest the berries, you'll actually throw up. So anyhow, to make a very long story short, that tea can be used to make kombucha. And that is a great basis for kombucha. So one of my concerns if you're selecting kombucha is if you have an issue with oxalates, understand what tea they're using as a base. Green tea is a little bit better than black tea as far as oxalates are concerned. Secondly, how much residual sugar is in it? Because we get into this idea that we categorize things healthy or not healthy. And most of us would categorize kombucha in the healthy side. But there's a lot of junk kombucha out there as well that if it's been fermented long enough, the available sugars, most of them or all of them have been eaten by the bacteria and the yeast through the fermentation. But if not, or if they're secondarily fermented, or if they're adding a bunch of other things at the end after the fermentation, then you can have a very sweet kombucha and you're getting as much sugar as you're drinking another kind of a soft drink. So again, like anything else, you can make a better version of just about any of these foods in your own home and control all of those things at the same time. But I do like good kombucha. We get our kombucha from Hex Ferments in Baltimore, and they're awesome. I just want to again qualify the alcohol part of this. My wife and I enjoy a glass of wine. Like we rarely drink hard alcohol, and if we do, it's really high quality alcohol, and it's for a special occasion. I don't drink hardly any beer anymore. When I do, it's all sour. But I don't drink a lot of beer. But we do truly enjoy a glass of wine. And I just even today was looking, or I was listening to on social media, people on both. It's just like everything else. It's become so polarized. You're either completely dry or you're considered an alcoholic when it comes to alcohol. And it's like everything else. Carnivore, vegan, or all these things are really separating us. And I truly believe there's, in many cases, well-intentioned, loud voices on both sides of this. But the majority of the public listening to this is somewhere in the middle and incredibly confused. I am not suggesting that you need alcohol to be healthy, or alcohol should be a part of your diet from a nutritional perspective. But like everything else, that when I remember, I had an incredibly unhealthy relationship with food for so long. Luckily, I don't believe I had an incredibly unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but I did go to college. I was a part of that scene for a little bit as well. But where I've landed is I enjoy food. I enjoy life. I love foraging. I love hunting. I love going to the farmer's market. I love cooking, especially if somebody else is there with me. I love cooking for people. I love the act of sitting down and sharing food. All of those things I just mentioned to me are just as important as how much protein and fat and carbohydrates may or may not be in the food that I'm serving. So that's an incredibly important part of this. When we think about alcohol, for those of us who have the opportunity, because I know for some people having a healthy relationship with alcohol is an impossible thing, but for those of us who can have a healthy relationship with alcohol, I would consider giving yourself some grace and understanding that first, just like every other category of food, there is a huge diversity within anything like wine or beer or drinks, that some of this stuff is a lot healthier than another one. So if you can find those sources of alcohol, the act of sitting down and having a high quality glass of wine and the conversation that follows with somebody that you love or whatever is an incredibly powerful act, and is something to think about in a different way than these large voices that are yelling at us, back and forth. Again, I'm not suggesting we should drink. I'm not suggesting we should drink every day. I'm not suggesting we drink once a week. What I am suggesting is everybody needs to find their own path with this, and to understand there are more options than just all in or all out for a lot of this. And for most of us who are navigating an incredibly complex world, everybody's path is a little bit different.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
We went to Sardinia. The place in Sardinia we were at was actually the epicenter of the first blue zone ever identified. It was not only in Sardinia, it was actually in the same village. What we experienced there was the exact opposite from a food perspective.